All right. Hey, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Saturday, June 11th, 2022. Your daily tropical update in video form this morning. Thought I owed y'all a little more than the pretty lackluster effort over the last few days, barfing out some tropical updates at 11 o'clock at night. Not exactly acceptable, but sometimes real life does get in the way, and it do be like that. So thought I'd kick a little video this morning. There are no immediate concerns for the eastern U.S. We are not talking about any active storms today. We're just kind of kicking some rocks on things down the road. So if you are terribly bored and would like to stick along with us for this ride, that'd be cool. Or if you just want to put something on for the dog or the kid in the background, hey, that's cool too. So take a look at your Atlantic Basin here this morning. It is a pretty common sight for mid-June. We don't have a ton of activity going on. This is, again, statistically one of the quietest months of the hurricane season. So everything's kind of still falling into place. You're still well behind on time for your African waves to move off. We're not looking for any long range long track Cape Verde type hurricanes yet. So most of our activity does wind up being closer to the coast, and that's kind of what we're tracking. So we're tracking two storylines, I would say, in the Atlantic. One next week off the coast of the eastern U.S. potentially, and the other one down in the western Caribbean going into about next weekend, that 7 to 10 day window. And then we're looking at a system potentially developing next week in the eastern Pacific. So we'll start over there because that's probably the most likely development area. National Hurricane Center's 5 day outlook, 80% chance of development on this system, which we're now dubbing Invest 92E. This is a system that's starting to develop. It is taking its time as they do over here. But Hurricane Center does have this up to an 80% chance of development by the middle of next week. And this is expected to meander off the southwestern coast of Mexico. Now, this doesn't have a lot of direct impact to the eastern U.S., so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. But you can see here, satellite loop this morning do have this kind of broad low pressure envelope. You can see some eastward motion in the clouds down here, westward in the motion in the clouds up here. But thunderstorm activity very scattered here. No signs of immediate organization, and definitely no signs of closed lows. There's a few little small circulation centers, but they're kind of popping up and dying really quick. Very common for this time of year, seeing low pressure gyres kind of form up around southern Mexico and Central America, and this is all going to generally drift slowly off to the west and likely to form up over a couple days as it sits over warm water, begins to start firing off more thunderstorms. They kind of organize. You kind of know the drill. But again, this is expected to kind of wander around the ensemble models. Not too keen on it from the European model. A handful of ensembles starting to pick up on it. GFS picking up on this much more. And you can see the general mean direction is some kind of west or northwest sort of drift, where we are less likely to see something like Agatha that turned and moved through Mexico and across. This is much more likely to just sort of drift along the coast here. Not even sure if we're going to get a direct landfall. The GFS operational runs, again, by Tuesday shows this kind of picking up. And then on this particular operational run does have it intensifying pretty quick by becoming a strong tropical storm to a hurricane by Wednesday. But if you look at the last couple of runs of the GFS, it's kind of all over the place. Some runs it's showing a hurricane, other runs it's showing nothing. So it's still kind of hit or miss with what we'll see out of this. But the waters are decently warm enough. The thing about the Eastern Pacific is there's a shelf of much cooler water somewhere in here. So as long as it stays below a certain line of latitude, it's good. It moves any further north, and stuff goes south really quick for these systems. So again, no threat to the Eastern U.S., but that's probably our next system to spin up, which will be over in the Eastern Pacific. Now, over to the Atlantic side of things, again, the two storylines we are tracking here this morning. Number one is potential for a little bit of mischief off the coast of Florida and the southeast U.S. going into this week, possibly. It's very, very possibly, very conditional threat here. And what we're talking about is a thunderstorm complex moving off of the coast this week. I'll show you this tweet from Eric Webb over on Twitter. This kind of helps show this. This graphic is nice and neat and easy to understand. But this is kind of what we're talking about here. Is what we'll see next week is a ridge of high pressure building in over the eastern U.S. Very hot, sticky, nasty, gross, just heat wave type hot high pressure. Okay. Now, when you get these, you're going to have the jet stream way up here in Canada and across the Northeast, and between the hot high pressure and that, you get these thunderstorm complexes. Now, this one will be oriented and propagate more southward instead of eastward because of the orientation. You can see the jet stream very elevated, very arched up here, and then this high rotates in a clockwise fashion. So you kind of have this rotating clockwise high pressure, and the storm system is likely to eject more to the south and pop up offshore. Well, it gets offshore, this ridge migrates and it'll block whatever comes offshore from moving out to sea. Instead, it'll just kind of get stuck under the high and begin to wander off to the west. Now, there are instances where these do form tropical systems. They come off the coast, they sit over warm water, there's light wind shear because you're under this high pressure influence, there's not a lot of wind shear and stuff like that, and the systems can slowly organize. We saw this with Tropical Storm Barry back in 2019. It did the same thing. It popped off the coast, took a few days, and it spawned up over here in the Gulf, and then went up into the central Gulf Coast, wound up being the wettest storm in Arkansas state history. So we do have these from time to time pop up. Actually, Barry was a hurricane. I'm pretty sure it was a Category 1 hurricane when it made landfall. So it's not impossible, right? Now, again, this threat is conditional because it doesn't guarantee that this is actually going to happen. We've seen instances where these things come off and don't do anything. They just kind of fall apart. They dissipate. It's not even exactly sure what kind of thunderstorm complex we would really get out of this, so it's hard to determine. What I would say about these early season systems as they pop off here is those can be kind of indications of how the season may go. There's always a magic in the background of really active hurricane seasons. Like we do kind of expect this one to be pretty active. And you'll see like in 2005 or in 2020, let's say, or even like 2017, it was just like anything that could be a tropical storm was, you know. There was just like just this magic dust in the air. There's anything that got going would just take off, you know. So we'll see if this pops off, you know, could be a harbinger of things to come later in the season. I don't think it would be an amazing, serious, horrible threat by any stretch. Again, June hurricanes are very rare. We've only had 19 since 1850, so I wouldn't be running for the hills necessarily. But you know, it could help spawn some issues down the road, maybe in the Gulf of Mexico, maybe for Florida. We'll see. There's no particular threat right now, but we'll be watching the southeast U.S. coast as we go into the middle of next week. And finally tonight, guys, this morning, we're also watching the Western Caribbean down the road. We're going to have some tropical waves propagating across the Atlantic. Again, Hurricane Center's analysis does show these tropical waves moving through. These aren't very strong. They're not your big buff mid-season waves, but these little early season waves still move across. They kind of run silently for the most part. But you'll have this general gyre of circulation of disturbed weather around Central America, and sometimes these waves like to turn up a little bit. They get mixed up with this, and then sometimes you can get formation of a tropical storm. We remember a couple weeks ago, before Agatha, the GFS was insistent we were going to get one of these systems, and then instead we got Agatha over here, and then she moved across. So it doesn't always happen that way, but GFS has still been kind of hinting at this. This is set for Sunday, June 19th, or really Saturday night of next week. So a week from today, basically. GFS showing weak low pressure moving into the Yucatan Peninsula. But if we jump back the last couple runs, you can see it's kind of been all over the place. Had a tropical storm on the other end of the Yucatan. Kind of nothing here, kind of nothing here. But then go back a couple more runs, and even going back to yesterday morning's runs, it was showing a hurricane moving into western Cuba. So it's starting to back off on these solutions, but it is something that the model has been consistently showing that there'll be some development here in about a week's time. Now, the ensemble models don't necessarily agree. European model ensembles do not show any strong development, and the few ones that do show mostly show something shunting into the Central America or southern Mexico area. This makes some sense because over the next 2 weeks, we're going to have pretty hot, stagnant high pressure over the eastern U.S. This will likely block anything from being able to turn really far north. It'll probably force anything like this way. You know, we wouldn't count it out in Texas yet, but it looks like the majority of solutions for now is showing more of that south and, you know, more westerly sort of solution. GFS ensembles, again, some of those model members showing the more active development and a more northward trajectory, while a lot of the members also do show something a bit weaker. This also plays on the biases of these models in the long term. The European typically will overestimate high pressures. The European probably sees a really strong high pressure system that's forcing everything really far south with land interaction, which keeps it weak, where the GFS probably sees a bit weaker of a high pressure over here and is probably keeping the door open for something moving further north. It's just something we're watching down the road. This is still just model watching. I don't think we're going to see anything serious come out of this, but you know, we'll be watching it just in case. You never know what might happen. Sometimes these systems can kind of weakly spin up, move across, and then they'll sit down here in the southern Gulf of Mexico for a while. And then when conditions change, they'll pull north. So that's something to watch as well. Something like, Cristobal from 2 years ago did that. It just kind of sat here for days and days and days and days. And then the weather pattern changes. Say this high finally moves off, and then there's, a trough coming in, and then it gets picked up by the trough and then moves up. So, a couple different solutions possible. It's all down the road. It's nothing pressing or immediately concerning. So that's what I got for you guys this morning on your little look at the tropics. Again, we'll probably have a system in the Eastern Pacific by the middle of next week. We'll also be watching for a potential for a thunderstorm complex move off the coast and then could wander around Florida, could develop into something, who knows. And then the longer term, we'll have to see if anything can come up out of the Caribbean and get going around here in Central America in about a week to 10-day time frame. So that's what I got for you guys this morning. As always, thanks for watching and have a good one.